is SMNI News Channel. Truth that matters.
In the headlines, a political commentator questions Bongbong Marcos's actions and accomplishments during his 2 years as President of the Philippines. This scrutiny follows mounting criticism, especially from supporters of the Maisog movement. Jay Sonsa emphasizes that the Marcos administration must address the grievances voiced by the people and not to disregard it. In other news, due to the Philippines' close ties with the U.S. government, a former top diplomat raises fears that the country could potentially become a target of Russia's nuclear missiles. This follows Russian President Vladimir Putin's warning that U.S. missile systems in other countries, including ours, would prompt a response from Moscow. And Indonesia is set to inaugurate its new president and vice president Prabowo Subianto and Gibran Rakabuming Raka in October. Prabowo will replace outgoing President Joko Widodo, who is Gibran's father. I am Franco Baranda. Newsline World starts now. A political commentator has questioned the achievements of President Bongbong Marcos in his 2 years in the office. What has he accomplished so far? How has he managed the Philippine economy in his 2 years at Malacanang? Here's the report.
Bongbong Marcos has been president for 2 years now. How has the Philippines fared under his leadership? Political commentator Jay Sonsa questions what Marcos has achieved in this time. This comes after former President Rodrigo Duterte urged BBM to get to work.
Ano bang nagawa niya? Hindi sa ayuda. Puro ayuda eh. Parang pinagtatakpan yung kakulangan ng paggawa sa pamamagitan ng pagbibigay ng kakarampot at saka piling-pili. Ha? Yun nga lang dumaan ka sa EDSA, lumaki. Oh. Yun lang airport, pagkabantod-bantod, may surut, may daga. Anong pwede natin pagyabang na ginawa ng Pangulo?
In the National Day of Protest by Hakbang na Maisog on June 30, various sectors expressed their sentiments against the current administration. They mentioned broken promises like the 20 peso per kilo rice, reducing the cost of goods, creating more jobs, and resolving the ongoing tensions with China in the West Philippine Sea, which could escalate to war. Many also condemned the violent, inhumane police attack on the religious compounds of the Kingdom of Jesus Christ that happened on June 10. This illegal search was clearly a violation of the law. The current government's suppression of press freedom after suspending the operations of SMNI was also criticized.
Hindi ka na nga nakakapagserbisyo ng maayos. Anong tawag nito? Yung lalansihin mo pa yung taong bayan, no? Kasi mangangako ka ng bigas, hindi mo naman kaya ibigay. Tapos magbibigay ka ng mura-mura, mabaho na. Pagkatapos ang nakikita ng tao, biyahe ka ng biyahe, gastos ka ng gastos. Mo, hindi ko alam kung saan sila nanghihiram ng mukha para iharap sa taong bayan. Kasi nakakainis eh. Tayong lahat ay nagbabayad ng buwis. Kumain ka sa labas, magbabayad ka ng bat. Pero walang bumabalik eh.
Sonsa also reminded the current administration about the National Day of Protest in the Philippines and abroad.
Hindi na ito dapat pinagkikibit-balikat lang ng mga namumuno kasi may kasalanan tayo sa kasaysayan ng politika at governance sa mampaling ng mundo. Kapag hindi na nakikinig o hindi nakinig ang namumuno sa isang pamayanan o isang bansa, yan ay hudyat na ng kawalan na practically hindi na siguro kalabisan na anong tawag nito, wala ka ng karapatan na mamuno dyan. Mas nakabibingi ito. At kapag ito ay tuluyan mong in-ignore at biglang nagliyab, goodbye ka.
Sonsa advises Marcos not to turn a deaf ear and a blind eye to the true sentiments of the people. For God and my beloved Philippines, Franco Baranda, SMNI News.
The Philippines could face new enemies due to its close ties with the U.S. government. MJ Mondihar reports.
Russia is resuming the production of short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles that can be armed with nuclear warheads. despite having agreed to cease this activity. According to Russian President Vladimir Putin, they are reinstating the deployment of such weapons because the U.S. violated their agreement first. In 1987, Russia and the U.S. signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces, or INF Treaty, to halt the production of such nuclear arsenals. However, President Putin criticized the deployment of U.S. nuclear arsenals in Denmark and the Philippines. In his latest column, former Philippine ambassador to Greece and Cyprus, Rigoberto Tiglao, explained that the deployment of the U.S. state-of-the-art ground-based missile system in northern Luzon is what Putin considers a violation. Tiglao explained that the United States Typhoon weapon system stationed in the Philippines can reach Chinese territories. He emphasized that Putin's mention of the Philippines as a location for the U.S. weapon system is a significant threat. Putin is a known ally of Chinese President Xi Jinping, both leaders of nuclear-powered nations. Therefore, according to Tiglao, Russia now adds to the threat against the Philippines alongside China. Geopolitical analyst Professor Ana Malinduguy believes the government should not ignore the Russian president's statement.
So, yun yung mahirap doon kasi nasa loob ka ng configuration, military configuration ng Russia of countries who might they see as a threat to their own survival or to their own security.
Tiglao called on both chambers of Congress to inspect the EDCA sites to verify if the U.S. nuclear weapons deployed during the previous U.S.-Philippine Balikatan military exercises are still present.
Parang dun sa meeting ni President Putin sa kanyang security forces, ito yung elite forces ng Russia, no? Ito yung mga generals, high-ranking officials na nasa military ng Russia, is parang tinatanong din niya kung tinanggal nga ba ng United States or nandito pa sa Pilipinas itong mga missile na ito. And take note, these are nuclear. This is even against our constitution. In our constitution, we don't allow nuclear weapons in the country.
For Government of Philippines, I'm Jem Ondihap, SM9 News.
The Philippine Army is confident that this year they will eliminate the remaining weakened guerrilla fronts of the communist terrorist groups, the CBP and PA. In an interview with SM9 News, an Army spokesperson said they are now targeting only 7 weakened guerrilla fronts. Let's hear more from this report with Almar Forzuelo.
Since former President Rodrigo Duterte established the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict or NTF-ELCAC, the Philippine government has achieved numerous feats against local terrorists and communist terrorist groups. Due to the government's whole-of-the-nation approach in addressing armed conflict, thousands of members of the Communist Party of the Philippines and its armed wing, the New People's Army or CPP-NPA, have returned to the fold of the law. In an interview with SM9 News, Colonel Luis Di Maala, spokesperson of the Philippine Army, said that just this year, they have already neutralized over 600 rebels and recovered hundreds of firearms.
From January to June 2024, the Philippine Army recorded a total of 608 LTGs and CTGs na neutralized. Out of that 608 na neutralized na LTG and CTGs, 458 doon are surrender, and then the rest is either killed or captured. Period.
As time goes by, the forces of the communist terrorist groups in the Philippines continue to weaken. Currently, the army is monitoring only 7 weakened guerrilla fronts and expects to dismantle these within the year.
As of now, and recently, with the pronouncement of the Chief of Staff, we have, as of the second quarter 2024, we have now 7 remaining guerrilla fronts, weakened guerrilla fronts. So yan na lang yung tinitingnan natin ngayon at hoping na this year will be dismantled na. Ang focus na lang natin is yung sa Central Front and yung sa Southern Panay Front, Negros area, yung ano natin. Then dun sa North naman is yung dito sa Central Luzon, covering Central Luzon and itong Isabela, Cagayan.
To prevent the return of communist terrorist groups to communities they previously terrorized, the Philippine government continues to implement programs that assist citizens, especially in remote areas.
Yung mga programs under the National Task Force in Ending Local Communist Armed Conflict. So ito ang napaka-importante dahil tuloy-tuloy dapat natin masustain yung mga gains natin dun sa areas na previously cleared natin para hindi na sila mabalikan.
For God, my beloved Philippines, Almar Forzuelo, SMNI News.
Indonesia will inaugurate its new president and vice president in October in the capital of Jakarta. Anissa de Guzman reports.
Indonesia prepares to welcome its new president and vice president who will be sworn into office before the end of the year.
President-elect Prabowo Subianto and Vice President-elect Gibran Rakabuming Raka are all set for their inauguration on the 20th of October. The winning presidential pair will replace outgoing President Joko Widodo, who is Gibran's father, and Vice President Maruf Amin. The inauguration was supposed to take place in the city of Nusantara in East Kalimantan, which will later replace Jakarta as the new capital. But the plan got cancelled last minute. However, Indonesian officials plan to celebrate Independence Day in East Kalimantan on August 17 to mark the transfer of capital status from Jakarta to Nusantara. Meanwhile, Subianto assured he is in good health and recovering following a leg surgery last week. He made a statement amid concerns about his health ahead of the inauguration.
The inauguration will take place after Indonesia held its general elections on February 14. It was considered the biggest elections worldwide with more than 200 million registered voters. Reporting from Macau, I'm Anissa de Guzman, your global citizen correspondent for God and our beloved country, the Philippines.
Up next, Australia's longest-serving Indigenous prisoner is finally free after spending decades behind bars. And Japanese protesters have taken to the streets to rally against the increasing cases of sexual violence allegedly committed by U.S. troops stationed in Japan. The protest follows revelations that a U.S. Air Force member was indicted for allegedly kidnapping and sexually assaulting an underage girl in December. Subsequently, more cases have come to light. Stay tuned for more news. Hundreds of protesters held a rally over the rising cases of sexual crimes committed by U.S. military personnel assigned in Japan. The public expressed their frustration and dismay as to why these cases, which had taken place months ago, were only revealed by the government and the U.S. military recently. Ria Saito has the news.
Local residents, particularly in the Okinawa Prefecture, are concerned over reports of U.S. military personnel accused of committing sexual crimes in Japan. The protesters gathered in Tokyo after the local media exposed the shocking news. The total number of sexual violence cases implicating U.S. soldiers in Japan has now risen to 5. The cases, with the earliest dating back to February 2023, have gone unreported since last year. Protesters took it to the streets after it was revealed last week that a U.S. Air Force member was indicted in March for allegedly kidnapping and sexually assaulting an underage girl in December. A U.S. Marine was also indicted in June for allegedly attempting to sexually assault a woman and injuring her. Shortly after, 3 more cases came to light, resulting in escalating public anger. The newer cases took place in February and August 2023 and the other in January 2024.
沖縄が該当しているのに沖縄の知事に自治体にも知らせないということはね、もしかしたら知らせていたらばその後のね事件というのは防げたかもしれないわけですよね。米軍に抗議をするとか自治体の方の警察を強化するとか、それもできなくなったということで、その後の事件もねやっぱり責任を があると思うんですね。ですから非常に外務省には抗議するっていうことで。
私が学生の頃に沖縄のこの基地の中でやってるカーニバルが祭りがあったんですけど、その時に米兵の人たちもいっぱいいるんですよね。で後ろから羽交い締めにあって電話番号を教えてということで相手も酔っ払っていて、で私当時19歳20歳ぐらいだったんですけど、どんなに力をやってももう外せないし抵抗ができない。
絶対許せないと思っております。だからいやまさかそんなことが起こってるってこともちょっと信じられなくて、ニュースになった時は最初ちょっと信じられなかったんですけど、なんかその後にこの30年間の中でも30件近くですかね、性暴力事件起こってる中で半分ぐらいが報告されてなかったっていうのを聞いて、今に始まった問題じゃないんだっていうのを知りまして、なんかますます怒ってます。絶対許せないなと思ってます。
Amid criticisms that the Pentagon is turning a blind eye, a military spokesman said U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is closely tracking the cases of the erring personnel accused of committing sexual crimes in the Okinawa Prefecture, where more than 30 U.S. military facilities are based. Additionally, Defense Department spokesman Pat Ryder said the U.S. expressed regrets over the incidents and that the American officials are working closely with local communities over the said cases. Ryder admitted that the alleged behavior of the American troops in question does not reflect the core values of the U.S. military. Residents were frustrated and dismayed upon knowing that some cases were not addressed for more than a year and the government failed to notify local officials in Okinawa Prefecture. The incidents revived the long-standing opposition concerning the presence of American troops in Japan. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this has been Ria Saito, your global citizen correspondent for God and our beloved country, the Philippines.
Australia's longest Indigenous prisoner has finally tasted freedom after spending 40 years behind bars. Derek Bromley has been released on parole after serving 4 decades in jail and maintained he did not commit the crime. Bromley was initially given a life sentence for the murder of Stephen Dakosa, whose body was found dumped in a river in 1984. Now aged 68, the Adelaide resident was reported to be the longest-serving Indigenous prisoner in Australia. Bromley has made repeated attempts to overturn his conviction but failed. But a turn of events changed after the state's parole board granted him parole due to his exemplary behavior in prison. The court also heard the victim might have died of natural causes. The capital city of Thailand ranked as the 3rd most expensive city in Southeast Asia. Chatmongkong Pisamay-Goson reports.
Bangkok once again joined the list of costliest cities in Southeast Asia. The Thai capital rose to 3rd place in 2024. Business consultant Mercer ranked Thailand as the 3rd most expensive city in Southeast Asia for international workers. Singapore topped the list of the most expensive cities in the region, followed by Phnom Penh, Cambodia. Manila, Philippines was ranked the 4th most expensive city, and Jakarta, Indonesia landed 5th. Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing, and Seoul were also ranked among the most expensive cities in Asia. The report pointed out that the cost of living crisis made it more difficult to attract and retain top talent, and at the same time increased the cost of compensation and benefits. Inflation has affected cities across the world, with Asia ranked the costliest region for luxury living. The report assessed 226 cities across 5 continents and compared the cost of over 200 items in each location. Reporting from Thailand, I'm Chatmongkong Pisamay-Goson, your global citizens correspondent for SMNA News Channel.
Egypt has implemented a stricter approach on illegal immigration as the Middle Eastern nation became a magnet for migrants and refugees who are trying to escape conflicts from their respective countries. Jonathan Acobo has the story.
Marhaba! Egypt launched a campaign to regulate the stay of millions of foreign residents seeking refuge on its soil by toughening its stance on illegal migration.
The Sudanese national constitutes the largest number of foreigners staying in Egypt, which currently stands at 4 million. At present, more than 1 million Sudanese have taken refuge in Egypt since the civil war erupted in the Northeast African nation more than a year ago. According to the United Nations, the ongoing conflicts in Sudan have displaced more than 8 million people, with some of them seeking refuge in neighboring nations like Egypt, Chad, and South Sudan. Of 1 million Sudanese who escaped in Egypt, about 500,000 or 600,000 are thought to have illegally crossed into the country. These illegal migrants are taking perilous journeys across the desert, with smugglers charging 300,000 Sudanese pounds, about $500 per person. In recent weeks, Egypt deported hundreds of Sudanese migrants who entered the country illegally. The intensified crackdown on illegal migrants raised concern among the Sudanese community after the deadline given by Egyptian authorities for foreign nationals to legalize their immigration status expired on July 1st. Iraqis, Syrians, and Yemenis also arrived in Egypt in large groups to escape conflict in their respective countries.
Around 9 million foreigners from 133 countries reside in Egypt, most of whom are long-term residents. Reporting from Dubai, I'm Jonathan Nicobo, your global citizen correspondent for SM9 News Channel.
And before we end, may be inspired with the words of the sun. No matter who you are or whatever your circumstances in life, there are always things to be grateful for. And that's all for this edition. For more news updates, you may visit sminewschannel.com or follow us on our official social media accounts on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. For God and my beloved country, the Philippines, I am Franco Baranda, and this is Newsline World.